Chapter 1. The Knock That Started It All. Bang, bang, bang. The loud, rapid knocking on my front door startled me so much that I nearly spilled my coffee all over my lap. It was 7 a.m. on a Saturday, and I was barely awake, still wrapped in my blanket, enjoying the peaceful morning. But apparently, peace wasn't an option today. I sighed, put my mug down, and opened the door, only to be greeted by the sight of Martha Cunningham, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, standing there with a clipboard clutched in her hands. Her face twisted in disapproval, like she had just smelled something rotten. "Good morning, Martha," I said, forcing a polite smile. She didn't return the courtesy. Instead, she adjusted her oversized sunglasses, cleared her throat, and dramatically waved the clipboard in my face. "This," she announced, "is a formal notice. Your vehicle is in violation of HOA regulations. You need to remove it immediately." I blinked, trying to process her words through the fog of my half-awake brain. "Violation? It's just an RV, Martha. I checked the rules before I bought it. There's nothing in there against RVs." She huffed like a steam engine ready to explode. "It is an eyesore. An absolute blemish on our beautiful neighborhood. We have standards here, young man." She emphasized young man like I was some rebellious teenager and not a full-grown adult who had paid his mortgage on time for years. I glanced back at my RV. It was a brand-new Class C motorhome, parked neatly in my own driveway, not obstructing anything, not leaking oil, not blaring music at all hours of the night. Meanwhile, Martha's own house had plastic flamingos in the yard and an unpainted fence falling apart at the hinges. But sure, my RV was the real problem here. "Look, Martha, I'm not blocking anyone's driveway. I'm not making noise. What exactly is the issue?" She gasped dramatically as if I had just questioned the existence of gravity. "The issue is that it lowers property values. People see a giant camper parked outside a house, and they assume this neighborhood is turning into a trailer park." I stifled a laugh. "You do realize that's completely irrational, right? My RV isn't affecting your home's worth." She puffed up like an angry cat. "It is against the aesthetic integrity of our community. This is your first and only warning. You have 7 days to remove it, or you'll be fined $100 a day until you comply." I folded my arms. "And what if I don't?" She smirked, her beady little eyes shining with malice. "Then we escalate. We will tow it. We will fine you into submission. And if necessary, we will take legal action. The HOA always wins." And with that, she spun on her heel and marched back down my driveway, leaving me standing there in my pajamas, staring at the ridiculous notice in my hand. This was only the beginning. I wasn't about to roll over that easily. This was my property, my home, and I wasn't going to let some power-hungry HOA dictator tell me what I could and couldn't park in my own driveway. So, I did what any reasonable person would do. I decided to fight back. Chapter 2. The Rules of Engagement. I started by checking the HOA bylaws. I spent an entire evening combing through every rule, every clause, every technicality. Nowhere did it explicitly state that RVs were banned. The only vaguely related rule was something about unsightly vehicles, which was completely subjective and clearly just something Martha was twisting to her advantage. Armed with my newfound knowledge, I attended the next HOA meeting, expecting to have a calm, rational discussion. I should have known better. The moment I brought up the rules, Martha cut me off, her voice shrill enough to make dogs whimper. "You don't get to question the HOA's decisions," she snapped. "We are the governing body of this neighborhood, and our word is final." I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "So you're saying the rules don't actually matter? You just make things up as you go?" She turned red, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. The other HOA board members, mostly her friends, nodded along with her nonsense, clearly afraid to oppose her. After an hour of going in circles, I realized reasoning with these people was pointless. They weren't interested in fairness or logic. This was about control. Martha wanted to win. Fine. If she wanted a fight, I'd give her one. Chapter 3. The First Move. That night, I made my move. I parked my RV in the HOA's visitor parking lot. Not in anyone's way. Not breaking any actual rules. Just sitting there, perfectly legal and perfectly visible. If Martha thought my driveway was bad, she was about to have a meltdown over this. The next morning, I watched from my porch as Martha stormed toward the visitor lot, her expression shifting from confusion to horror. She whipped out her phone, dialing someone, probably the tow company, but I already knew how that was going to go. I had checked the parking rules. Nowhere did it say RVs were prohibited in visitor parking. And since I was a homeowner, I had the right to use the lot for my own guests, which, in this case, happened to be me. She stomped over to my house, her face so red I thought she might actually burst into flames. "This is outrageous," she shrieked. I took a long sip of my coffee. "Good morning, Martha." "Something wrong." "You know exactly what's wrong," she fumed. "Move it. Now." I shrugged. "Sorry. HOA rules say visitor parking is open to all guests. My RV is my guest. You wouldn't want me to break HOA rules, would you?" For the first time, she was speechless. Completely, utterly speechless. It was beautiful. She turned on her heel, nearly tripping over her own feet as she stomped back toward her house. I could practically see the gears in her head turning, trying to figure out how to get back at me. But I wasn't worried. I had read the rules. I knew exactly what I was doing. And the best part? This was just the beginning. Chapter 4, The Counterattack. Martha wasn't one to take public humiliation lightly. I knew that the moment she stormed back into her house, she was already plotting her next move. That's how people like her operated. They couldn't stand losing, especially not to someone who dared to challenge their authority. Sure enough, 2 days later, I found a new letter stuffed in my mailbox. This time, it wasn't just a violation notice. It was a summons for a special HOA board hearing. The charge? Intentional disruption of community order. I laughed out loud. Community order? Really? These people acted like I had set up a circus tent in my front yard instead of parking a legally allowed vehicle in a perfectly legal spot. I knew exactly what this was. Martha had called in reinforcements. But I wasn't about to back down. Chapter 5, The Hearing. The night of the hearing, the HOA clubhouse was packed. Apparently, word had spread about my battle with Martha, and now, everyone wanted to see how it would go down. I walked in, calm and collected, while Martha sat at the head of the table like a self-appointed queen. Her minions, other HOA board members who wouldn't dare challenge her, flanked her on either side. They had already made up their minds. This was just a show trial. Martha cleared her throat dramatically. "We are here to address a serious matter regarding the deliberate disregard of community guidelines. Mr. Carter has chosen to challenge the established norms, disrupting the unity of our neighborhood." I leaned back in my chair. "By parking my RV?" Martha's nostrils flared. "By flaunting your disrespect for the rules." I smirked. "You mean the rules that don't actually exist?" "Because I read the bylaws, Martha. Nowhere does it say I can't park an RV in my driveway or in visitor parking." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some people were starting to question her. One of the older board members, Mr. Franklin, adjusted his glasses. "He's right, Martha. The bylaws don't prohibit RVs." Martha shot him a glare that could melt steel. "Then perhaps it's time we amended the rules." There it was. The real reason for this meeting. She wasn't interested in enforcing the rules. She wanted to change them so that she could win retroactively. I shrugged. "Go ahead. Try. But HOA rules require a community vote to approve amendments, and I have a feeling you're not going to get the support you think you will." A few people nodded. A few more murmured in agreement. And Martha knew, right then and there, that she had lost this battle. But this war wasn't over yet. Chapter 6, The Rebellion Spreads. With the hearing behind me, I realized something. This wasn't just about me and my RV anymore. Over the next few days, neighbors started approaching me, people I barely knew, sharing their own grievances about the HOA. Stories about arbitrary fines, ridiculous restrictions, and Martha's blatant abuse of power. I wasn't the first person she had gone after, but I might be the first one willing to fight back. So I made a decision. It was time to organize. I started by printing out copies of the HOA bylaws and distributing them to every house in the neighborhood. I highlighted sections that proved how much power homeowners actually had. I included a petition to demand a leadership change, one that would remove Martha and her inner circle from the board. At first, I wasn't sure if people would sign. Then the signatures started rolling in. Chapter 7, The Turning Point. It took 2 weeks to gather enough signatures to call for a recall vote. By then, Martha knew what was coming. She tried everything to stop it, claiming the petition was invalid, threatening to fine people for conspiring against the HOA. even going door to door, trying to scare people into withdrawing their names. But she underestimated how fed up people were. The night of the vote, the community center was jam-packed. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Martha sat at the front, glaring at me as I took my place beside Mr. Franklin, who had stepped up to challenge her presidency. One by one, people cast their votes. And when the final count was announced, the room erupted. Martha had lost. By a landslide. Chapter 8, Victory. With Martha gone, the new HOA board was elected within the month. The absurd restrictions started disappearing overnight. The ridiculous fines? Revoked. And best of all, my RV stayed right where it was. One afternoon, as I sat outside enjoying a well-earned victory beer, Ted walked by and gave me a nod. "Looks like you won." I chuckled. "Yeah, but really we all did." As Martha packed up and moved out of the neighborhood, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. It wasn't just about the RV. It was about standing up to people who thought they could control others for no reason. And I'd do it all over again in a heartbeat.